Y'all are not prepared for what you're about to hear. Because what's coming next isn't just gossip. It's the kind of confession that blows a family apart from the inside and exposes what Kandi Burruss and Todd Tucker tried desperately to keep hidden for over a decade. This isn't internet chatter. This isn't reality TV noise. This is Kaela Tucker stepping out of the shadows, ripping open the curtain, and finally revealing what tore her father's marriage to pieces, and who held the match. For years, the audience believed it was just surface-level mess. Blended family problems, parenting clashes, awkward moments caught on camera. But behind closed doors, it was brutal. It was frost-cold. And it was boiling beneath the surface in ways no one saw coming. Kaela didn't just talk. She set the truth on fire. She described being treated like she never mattered, how she felt singled out, how warmth was replaced with rules, how love turned into lectures, how her voice was ignored, how choices were made around her instead of with her, how she felt like a stranger in a home that was supposed to be hers. And then came the sentence that stunned everyone. Her own father, Todd Tucker, did not step in. According to Kaela, fatherhood always took second place to ambition. He wasn't dad. He was management, strategy, priorities. And when she needed protection the most, she says he vanished. She was invisible, isolated, left to survive alone. But that wasn't the end. Kaela dragged Mama Joyce into the light too. The woman she says never warmed to her, never embraced her, and made it perfectly clear she didn't belong. Kaela claimed Mama Joyce's hostility infected the entire household, and her disrespect toward Todd made everything inside that home feel toxic. So when the marriage finally collapsed, Kaela didn't just comment. She unloaded years of silence. And when you discover what she admits next, everything you thought you knew about this family will crumble.
And plus, you have a mom instinct. He thinks business-wise all the time. It's never daddy in business. It's business most of the time.
Am I gonna have a tipping allowance?
I never have an allowance. Not worth in the summers, but you don't know how to show affection.
I'm trying to make you tough, kid.
The second Kaela's old clip flooded back onto timelines, the Bravo universe went stone silent. Because in that instant, the fantasy of this flawless grind family collapsed in real time. This was no longer about a breakup. This wasn't just step-family friction. It became a live wire that had been sparking for years, and Kaela's words, stripped of polish and full of ache, were the spark that finally set everything ablaze. Viewers who once swore Kandi and Todd were untouchable were suddenly staring into something colder, deeper, and more devastating than they ever imagined. For over a decade, this household operated like a logo. A product, cameras flashing, smiles locked in, businesses booming. Everything on display looked perfect. But Kaela's voice, worn, careful, exhausted, exposed what no producer ever dared to show. While fans laughed along with OLG storylines and praised the power couple, a young woman was struggling to keep her identity intact inside a home where she never felt chosen, never felt secured, never truly felt claimed. So when Kandi officially dropped Tucker, when filings confirmed the split, when the internet erupted over the divorce, that interview stopped being history. It became proof. Proof the damage was old. Proof the collapse wasn't sudden. Proof the emotional fault lines existed long before courtrooms and captions. Inside those walls stood two daughters, Riley and Kaela, positioned like opponents from birth. Riley standing in the glow of her mother's authority, influence, and money. Kaela leaning on a father she says was rarely emotionally present. Kandi's control, Todd's rigidity, Riley's privilege, Kaela's loneliness. That wasn't a blended family, it was psychological warfare wearing a welcome home smile. People close to the situation now say the tension between Kaela and Kandi wasn't normal step-parent stuff. It was heavier, sharper, intimate. Kandi demanded outcomes, discipline, excellence. Todd pushed survival, independence, hustle. But Kaela wanted something no strategy board could provide: gentleness, warmth, a heartbeat, somewhere she could melt instead of brace. And when she didn't get that, she vanished inward, became smaller, quieter. Until that interview, until that one sentence, "You don't know how to give affection." With that, everything snapped into focus. This wasn't about rules, or chores, or hierarchy. This was emotional abandonment. A child hardening her heart because she didn't feel embraced, defended, or loved in the only place she should have felt untouchable. But the shock didn't stop there. Because Kaela didn't just point at Kandi, she quietly dismantled Todd's image too. Fans spent years casting him as the balanced one, the softer presence behind Kandi's dominance and Riley's confidence. Kaela shattered that illusion with a single truth: she wasn't raised by a father. She was raised by a schedule. It's never dad. It's business. And with that line, Todd's image cracked wide open. No longer the gentle mediator, but a man consumed by obligation, detached from emotion, absent when his child needed shelter the most. A man who didn't step in when Kaela felt erased by Riley, controlled by Kandi, or dismissed by Mama Joyce. And suddenly, the marriage ending didn't feel shocking anymore. It felt overdue. And as for Mama Joyce, Kaela didn't even have to say her name. Her hesitation said everything. The tension spoke louder than accusation ever could. Everyone already knew Joyce never warmed to Todd, but what nobody expected was how that frost extended to Kaela too. Insiders say she wasn't treated like part of the family, but like an interruption. Like an unwanted presence in Riley's world. Energy shifted when she entered a room. Conversations died. Joy vanished. Family dinners didn't feel like family, they felt like ceasefire negotiations. So when news of the split finally broke, viewers began asking the same question. Why does Kaela look happy? Why does she seem lighter? Why doesn't she look heartbroken, but free? And the answer cuts deep. For the first time in years, she wasn't being positioned as the problem. She wasn't the scapegoat. She wasn't the intruder. The truth finally surfaced, and with it came relief. Kaela didn't break that marriage. That marriage had been decaying in silence long before she ever spoke. Behind closed doors, Kandi had already relocated to New York. Broadway, branding, peace. Todd stayed rooted in Atlanta, trying to hold the business empire together. Their lives drifted apart long before lawyers got involved. Sources insist the communication faded, the presence disappeared, and connection was reduced to logistics. That wasn't a relationship. It was a transaction. And caught in that freeze were the children, 4 young lives trying to exist inside a bonding that had already fractured. Ace and Blaze were too young to understand why mom and dad no longer shared a space, why phone calls replaced hugs, why warmth vanished. Riley stood by her mother, rooting for her healing. But Kaela? Kaela lived the damage. She walked through it daily, breathed it in, carried it alone, because she wasn't just a daughter. She was the surface where every unresolved fracture showed. And eventually, that surface cracked. Fans once assumed Kandi walked away to find herself. But Kaela's story reveals something far heavier, a collapse fueled by emotional burnout on every side. A mother drained, a father absent, emotionally if not physically. 2 young women divided, a grandmother intensifying the chaos, and a home that never learned how to become one. Now, with hindsight, people are watching old footage differently. That stiff hug, that uncomfortable laugh, that fake smile. They're noticing every moment Kaela shrank on camera, every second Todd looked torn, every time Riley seemed distant, every glance from Mama Joyce that cut like glass. This breakup didn't arrive suddenly. It arrived slowly, silently, unavoidably. And Kaela's voice didn't just explain it. It unlocked it. Because what she says next will change how this story is remembered forever. What she says next changes everything. Because the second Kaela stopped censoring herself, the illusion of Kandi and Todd's untouchable marriage fell apart like a movie set when the lights cut on. Kaela wasn't just describing tension. She wasn't just naming favoritism. She wasn't just confessing to feeling unwanted. She went beneath all of it, into the emotional suffocation she says began the day she walked into that home. 4 years, she carried it in silence, trying to survive inside a household that operated like a company boardroom instead of a family living room. People assume the breakup is about contracts and cash, but the damage started as whispers, the kind you can't hear but you can feel. Hairline fractures that widened into emotional sinkholes. Ripples that swallowed any chance of repair. Kaela says the deepest crack was never announced, never posted, never explained, but inside those walls everyone knew. Not all voices were weighed the same. Not all pain counted. And not everyone belonged. Those closest to the situation now say Todd was being pulled in half, between his marriage and his child. And according to Kaela, he failed them both. He stayed frozen in between, assuming time would calm the chaos, never realizing silence only feeds it. While Kandi enforced order and Riley asserted control, Todd retreated, waiting for calm to arrive on its own. It never did. The walls closed in. The air went thin. And resentment grew teeth. Kaela describes evenings where tension had weight. Hallways felt hostile. Meals felt foreign. She says she sat at tables where she felt like a visitor instead of blood. She remembers Riley's looks, Kandi's cold presence, Mama Joyce's evaluation stares. And worst of all, her father watching it all happen while pretending everything was fine. Those nights, sources say, rewired her. She learned to make herself smaller, softer, quieter. Because every time she spoke, she felt labeled. Every time she opened up, she was told to grow thicker skin. Every attempt at vulnerability was turned into instruction. Every reach for warmth met glass. And the damage didn't stop at the front door. It chased her. It molded her self-image. It colored how she trusted. It reshaped what family meant to her. So when the divorce went public, people finally understood her reaction. For Kaela, this wasn't heartbreak. It was air. It was release. Relief. Skip. Friends say she cried for years over not being seen. Over not being included. Over always standing behind Riley. Over never receiving the love she begged for in silence. Over Todd being too afraid to confront the storm. But when the divorce became real, she didn't cry. She breathed. Because now, the world could finally see her truth. But the real jolt came when Kaela dropped something that forced people to rethink the entire marriage. She said Todd confided in her privately, admitting he felt unseen too. That appreciation was rare inside that home. That no matter how hard he worked, it never measured up. That he felt obligated to project strength even when he was empty. And that sometimes, he wondered whether the relationship still existed at all, or whether they were just managing a brand long after the love had vanished. Kaela says every time Todd tried to repair what was breaking, the healing never lasted. Peace would appear, and then disappear. Calm would settle, then crack. Just when it felt like things were improving, something would tear the wound open again. And slowly pain became routine. Routine became distance. Distance became quiet. And quiet, she says, is the most dangerous thing a home can have. Because silence doesn't just end conversations. It suffocates intimacy, drains warmth, and convinces you nothing can ever be saved. Sources close to the couple say Kandi started pouring herself into New York because Atlanta had become emotionally unbearable. Todd, on the other hand, drowned himself in work to escape what he couldn't fix. There were no affairs. No screaming matches. No explosive fights. Just two people moving in opposite directions, unaware of how far apart they had already become. But Kaela noticed. Long before blogs did. Long before fans did. Long before the headlines did. She watched the marriage weaken in real time. She watched love shrink into obligation. She watched connection morph into coordination. She watched her father pull away. She watched her stepmother quietly construct a life that no longer involved him. And deep down she knew, before anyone ever admitted it, this ending was inevitable. So when the news finally dropped online, the public gasped. Kaela didn't. She had already lived it. And now, for the first time, she felt brave enough to tell her truth. What she didn't expect was for the world to listen. Her words spread like wildfire. Clips flooded TikTok with captions screaming, "She was telling the truth," and "You can hear her heart breaking." People dissected every pause, every shaky breath, every tremor in her voice. They weren't watching drama. They were witnessing survival. But Kaela went further. She allegedly confided to someone close that she always felt Riley and Mama Joyce saw her as a threat. Not to money. Not to space. But to emotional command. Because if Todd stayed emotionally bonded to Kaela, something shifted. Alignment changed. Influence tilted. Power slipped. And that couldn't be allowed. And this is where the story turns unbearable. Kaela says she spent years chasing acceptance, shrinking herself, reshaping herself, trying to blend in, trying to be worthy, trying to fit inside a place that never truly wanted her. Until finally she understood, it was never her. She wasn't the problem. She wasn't the disruption. She wasn't the destruction. She was the truth nobody wanted heard. Now, with the divorce dismantling the illusion, Kaela's voice rises above the rest. It reframes the marriage, rectifies the narrative, and reveals what fame couldn't hide, a poison dynamic living behind polished smiles, success, and scripted perfection. And what's coming next? That's the part no one is ready for. Because when Kaela speaks again, there will be no filters. When Kaela speaks again, there will be no protecting anyone. Because the second she realized people were finally paying attention, she tore down every filter she'd ever used. No more cushioning the truth. No more downplaying the damage. No more pretending her past wasn't as heavy as it was. And what she started to reveal next wasn't just heartbreaking. It was the kind of emotional wreckage that makes you question every smiling picture, every so-called family memory, every moment packaged for television. Kaela didn't come for revenge. She came with reality. Untouched. unprettified. Uncomfortable truth about relationships that never healed, pain that never closed, and silent battles that slowly dismantled that marriage from the inside. People close to her say Kaela finally admitted something she'd never dared to say out loud. The unbearable pressure of performing a life that was never meant for her. Playing the part of being thankful while feeling ignored. Being obedient while feeling erased. Being present while being invisible. Constantly reshaping herself to keep everyone else at ease. Swallowing her emotions so the family brand wouldn't fracture in front of the lens. Smiling through moments that were quietly destroying her. She says she watched her father spin in every direction. Business crises, relationship struggles, financial stress, while her own emotional world gathered dust in the corners. And each time she reached for comfort, she met resistance. Not just from Todd, but from the entire structure of that household. An unspoken system of rivalry, imbalance, preference, and control. A system that taught her she was never enough. A system that kept her on the outside no matter how badly she wanted inside. People who were around her back then say she lived in a state of constant alert inside that house. That she'd practice conversations in her head before walking into a room, terrified of being reduced, ignored, or twisted. That she dodged conflict not because she was weak, but because she already knew the outcome. The order was decided long before she ever opened her mouth. Riley above all. Kandi beneath that. Mama Joyce standing behind them both. And Kaela? At the very bottom. Always last. Always overlooked. Always shrinking to fit into a corner nobody else wanted. So when Kaela finally tried to speak up behind closed doors, no one truly listened. They called her too emotional, too sensitive, too reactive. But she wasn't overreacting. She was worn out. And when someone is worn down long enough, honesty is no longer a choice, it's survival. The detail that stunned people the most wasn't about Kandi or Riley or even Mama Joyce. It was the moment Kaela realized her own father had stopped fighting. She says she could hear it in his voice, sense it in his quiet, see it in the way he sat through dinner, staring nowhere. The fire wasn't out, the faith was. Todd wasn't enraged. He wasn't resentful. He was depleted. And Kaela says that's when she knew it was already over, long before anyone dared to say it. She remembers nights where he disappeared into himself, dodging questions, sidestepping tension, refusing to argue because he no longer had the strength. Nights when Kandi was away in New York building dreams, and Todd stayed behind, parked in the living room, scrolling endlessly like he was looking for something that didn't exist anymore. Nights when Ace or Blaze asked when their mom was coming back, and he answered the same way every time with the same defeated tone. She's working. Nights when Kaela passed by him and realized he was carrying a kind of loneliness that never reaches headlines, the kind that only lives in empty houses and late hours. And when she saw it, she recognized it, because she had been living it too. Kaela says the divorce didn't shock her because the marriage had already ended in silence. It just hadn't been signed yet. It was waiting for ink, waiting for acceptance, waiting for the moment when separation felt kinder than pretending, waiting until quiet finally became truer than conversation. But the real detonation came when Kaela admitted her relief wasn't only about escape. It was about no longer having to lie to herself. She wasn't just glad the tension was ending, she was grateful she no longer had to pretend that place was a home. She didn't have to fold herself smaller. She didn't have to balance inside an emotional deficit. She didn't have to tiptoe around Mama Joyce's moods. She didn't have to armor up for Riley's remarks. She didn't have to chase affection that would never meet her halfway. She didn't have to carry guilt that was never hers. For the first time, she could finally inhale. But with that breath came something heavy, the understanding that the fallout wouldn't stop with the adults. And what she whispered next shattered even harder. She confessed that her deepest fear is for Ace and Blaze. Because they didn't build this storm. They didn't stoke the fire. They didn't choose the fractures. And now they're old enough to feel something is wrong but too young to understand why. Kaela knows what it's like to grow up under silence. To feel uninvolved in choices that rearrange your entire life. To carry emotions your hands are too small to hold. And she's terrified of history repeating itself through them. She also acknowledged Riley, not with bitterness but with a quiet wish. Kaela said she hopes one day Riley recognizes the entire frame. Because she believes their conflict wasn't born naturally, it was engineered. A system that rewarded rivalry. An environment that turned sisters into opponents. Where affection was rationed, and validation became currency. Then she spoke about Mama Joyce. Not with rage. Not with venom. But with clarity that cut deeper than anger. She said Mama Joyce never created space for her. Never let her in. Never softened even once. And while Kaela tried for years to pretend it didn't matter, it did. She doesn't hate her. But she now accepts something painful. Mama Joyce never wanted her there. And that truth-carved wound she still carries. Sources say it was Kaela's composure that crushed people. Because she didn't accuse. She didn't dramatize. She simply explained. And that honesty hurt harder than shouting ever could. Now that the chapter has officially closed, everyone is rebuilding in separate directions. Kandi is centering her life, her work, her healing. Todd is reorganizing his world. Riley stands by her mother. And Kaela? Kaela is finally discovering who she is without living inside rejection. But all eyes remain fixed forward. Because what she shares next could rearrange everything again. She's already cracked the illusion. She's already rewritten the narrative. She's already exposed the damage beneath the shine. And whatever comes next, may be the final collapse no one was ready to witness. You've just walked through every fracture, every quiet bruise, every truth this family tried to seal away for more than 10 years. And now you're standing at the rim of something that isn't simply a breakup. It's an implosion. One formed from years of swallowed hurt, empty apologies, buried anger, and a daughter finally daring to pull the truth into the light. This isn't run-of-the-mill tea. This is a post-mortem of a house that glittered on the outside and bled on the inside. And if Kaela has already opened the door this wide, imagine what's still hidden in the room she hasn't entered yet. Because there are gaps. Talks no one recorded. Evenings no one saw. Choices whispered in hallways. Turning points that sealed this outcome long before cameras ever rolled. And the truth isn't done moving. You can feel it in the air. Nothing has settled. Nothing has cooled. The energy is still volatile. One wrong sentence, one uncovered text, one memory reopened, and everything could ignite again. This is the kind of story where the heaviest revelation never arrives when you expect it. It strikes when you think the silence means it's safe. So don't relax. Don't assume the dust has fallen. Don't believe this family will just walk forward quietly. Because Kaela has already shifted the foundation. Her voice has split the illusion in half. Her truth has forced the world to look where it never wanted to. And when someone finally breaks years of silence, they rarely stop with just one confession. If you want to be here the instant the next earthquake hits, lock in now. Like, share, subscribe. Because the next chapter in this unraveling is coming. And when it does, it won't be soft. It will change everything you thought you knew. Stay alert.